Hello and welcome to another Scots Whay podcast, in which I'll be chatting to the writer J. David Symonds, initially about his latest novel, A Woman of Integrity, but also about his previous work, a Glasgow To Galilee trilogy, and one of my favourite novels, An Exquisite Sense of What is Beautiful. We also talk about the state of publishing at the moment and the difficulties in not only getting your book published but then subsequently promoted. And we look at David's fascinating life so far. He's a man who's done many different things. We also, for a change, have some questions from my mum, who's also a big fan of David's writing, and particularly of A Woman of Integrity, and she was just dying for me to ask a question on her behalf. Something we forgot to mention and meant to was an initiative by the Scottish Book Trust, which David is involved in, called Bookfellas. It is raising money to promote getting more men reading, and particularly dads reading to their children. And you can learn more about it by going to Scottish Book Trusts /Bookfellas, where you'll see some of the people involved, some of the bookfellas themselves, and just what they are doing to help raise awareness and to raise money. And David and his friend Raymond Solchizek are hiking across Mull, following the footsteps of David Balfour from Robert Louis Stevenson's Kidnapped. So it's something to check out, but before you do that, have a listen to David in conversation, and I'll see you on the other side of this. Hello everyone, and welcome to another Scots Whay podcast. And I'm joined today by J. David Symonds. Hello David.
Hi Alistair, nice to be here.
And David is a writer who I've admired for quite some time. We'll talk about your other books later on, but I think we'd like to start with your latest novel, A Woman of Integrity. Now, when I was at the launch of the book, the thing that stuck out for me was the thing that you couldn't talk about. You said, well, I can't go into specifics, and I'm not going to ask you to go into specifics, but what can you talk about in terms of A Woman of Integrity?
Right, well, I suppose I can say that the idea originally came, as it often does with in fact always does with my books, where suddenly I'm having a conversation with somebody and they say something and that kind of inspires me to think, I think I could write a novel about that.
Okay.
And so what happened with A Woman of Integrity was that I was down in Brighton with some friends, and one of whom is an actress, or actor, as we say nowadays, and she's relatively well known for playing a recurring part in a well-known BBC soap.
Right.
So I can't mention her name because then you can start tracing
Start joining the
looking
dots.
at her IMDb. Yeah. So anyway, so she told me this story where she was asked by an American producer if she would like to play the part of this very famous woman in a one-woman play, and when they went to the trustee of this deceased woman, when they went to the trustee to have access to the material, this trustee puts a very unusual condition on granting them the right to the material, and my friend, she was very interested in doing this play because she'd always admired this famous woman for her integrity.
Right.
And so when she was confronted by the trustee, she realises her own integrity was being challenged.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of liked that idea of respecting someone for whatever it is, and then when you decide to do something like a play or a film about them, that characteristic is challenged. So in this case, it was her integrity was being challenged as she was trying to do a play about a woman of integrity.
So you have these two characters. You have Georgie from the 1920s, I think is when we first meet her. Is that right?
Yeah, she's born in 1900.
Yeah.
All my historical characters are born in 1900.
Right.
Yeah. So Credit Draper, Sue Can. Yeah, they're all born in 1900 because that way I can remember how old they are as I'm going through the century.
That's a great trick. And then in the present day, that character's Laura, and so it's the similar scenario as you've just set out.
Yeah.
To me, you can't help but compare the two women, but also compare the two times.
Yeah.
What were you trying to say about the comparisons between those two times?
Well, I think what was interesting for me was that. I don't think I set out to sort of, to make a direct comparison per se.
Right.
But what was interesting for me was because I can't tell you who the famous woman is, right? In my friend's story, I therefore had to create a character that was completely different from that woman. And when it came to the Second World War, I had to find her a different occupation, basically, and in that process, I thought, well, what would a woman do during the Second World War? And there's kind of things like, barrage, working with barrage balloons, or nursing, or driving, and what I didn't know was that there were female pilots, and that was very interesting for me. And those female pilots were the first women to be paid the same as men for doing the same job. So I suppose to answer your question, what was interesting for me was this aspect almost of feminism that people tend to think, we're living in the modern times, or since the 60s, that was a great feminist era. But actually, when you go back to the 1920s with the suffragettes as well, but then also the 1940s and during the war, you find that women were doing amazing things as well, especially in the era of flight.
Yeah.
I mean, the Amy Johnsons of the world, Amelia Earharts and so on. I mean, they were doing fantastic things. The same as men. These long distance flights and so on. It's quite incredible.
I think the Second World War period in particular is fascinating for that, because it was almost out of necessity, that they said, well, we need people to do this. Who have we got? Well, we've got women who are still here because the men are away. And it happened even, I know a little bit about football at that time. Football continued with women's teams a lot of people went to watch these games.
Oh, well, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
That was because they still wanted their sport when they could get it, and all the kind of men of football playing age were overseas. It's so that kind of necessity, a bit like whenever people encourage any kind of immigration, it's usually out of necessity because there are jobs which are needing filled. Yeah. The problem happens is when those jobs suddenly there's the fight over them, and that after the Second World War was something that would have happened as well.
Same in the First World War.
Yeah.
When the women went, working in munitions factories and so on, especially, even around Glasgow and so on, and then suddenly the men came back
and wanted the jobs back.
And the women were going, wait a minute, we actually quite enjoying doing this,
Sure.
working and getting money and so on, and not having to depend on men. And I think that paved the way, in fact, for the suffragette movement, or at least pushed the suffragette movement forward.
Yeah.
And that whole flapper era and all that kind of thing, and getting rid of the corsets and all this kind of emancipation of women. So that was one of the interesting things for me. What I discovered from the two eras was just discovering how Georgie, my character from that era, how much of an independent woman she could be.
Now, I don't want to give away anything here, but Georgie is herself an actress as a young woman, and
something happens.
There is a choice that has to be made, and it refers to the idea of integrity. Did you know that was going to be a key point in the book, as in she makes a certain choice and then have got all the rest of her life to deal with?
Alistair, to be honest, I have no idea how that came about. I have no idea. When I think of it now, where did I get that idea from? I don't know. I find when, as a writer, that once I've created my characters, they tend to have a bit of a life of their own.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so what tends a lot of the time they just tend to do things that I hadn't even imagined, just because I put them. I feel that if you create well-rounded characters and you put them in a situation like Georgie at the beginning of this silent, well, it actually wasn't the beginning, in the transition period between silent screen and the talkies, what might happen to her, you know, that would challenge her integrity, and so I guess the situation that comes up in the book is just coming out of my imagination. I hadn't planned it.
You put her in that situation and you say, this is how I believe she would have responded to that. I think that's right. I think that's what makes the characters so strong themselves, because every action every choice that they make feels like the one that they would have made. It's not like a false, sending them down a different way for a different reason.
Well, that's good to hear, because I just think that for me as a writer, my novels are hopefully, as much as they can be, are character driven, and whereas some people will it'll be plot driven for some people, especially crime or so on, when there's lots of convoluted plots and plot lines and so on. But for me, I've always tried to make them character driven, with an underlying idea that's sort of a thread that goes through the whole novel. And in the case of Women of Integrity, it was this idea of integrity. That was the deeper theme. If Exquisite Sense was beautiful, the theme was denial, and so when I got that story from my friend of mine, I thought, okay, I'd like to write something about integrity, then create the characters, and then let's let them run with the novel after that.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, you have these two central characters who are very strong, but you also have a lot of supporting characters who are equally strong. How do you come to approach those?
Oh, I'm a great believer in secondary characters. I really am. I think Shakespeare was good at this, and I think I'm going to compare myself with Shakespeare. And I think when we look at you ask people what their favourite movies are, for example, Casablanca usually comes up high on the list. Yeah. And one of the reasons I think for Casablanca coming up on the list is, apart from the three main characters. And the issues that they have to deal with, Bogart and the guy whose name I never can remember, the actor. And
French actor, isn't he? Is that right?
No, that was another of the main. That was the triangle.
Oh yes, of course.
She had to decide over love and duty.
Yeah.
And so that was the main story. But then you had all these great characters: the French police officer, a French captain, and I can't remember the owner of the bar with his fez and the piano player and this, and so that when you were not concerned with the main story, you enjoyed being with these secondary characters. So I think that I tried to make all my sort of other characters interesting as well. So when you're not with the main story, you're going, oh, here comes so and so again.
That's the test of a really great secondary character, is you feel if the story had followed them, you'd have been quite happy to follow it, and see what happened with them.
Although you have to be careful that you don't get too distracted.
Sure, of course, yes.
So I try to make, I'm not sure who you're...
The ones I'm particularly thinking of are actually in the more present day ones. You've got
Quentin.
Laura's so-called best friend, but also fiercest rival, who has married
Caroline.
Who it's that fantastic thing of keep your enemies closer, because they seem to be just competing throughout their lives, whether for anything, for who marries the best, who gets the best roles, or anything like that. And also, is it Jack from Hollywood? Yeah, Jack. And so you've got this, I think I described him as being straight off the cover of Vanity Fair, but you can imagine this is a Hollywood actor who has done very well and who Laura has had in the past a relationship, and I would quite have liked to have known a little bit more about that. But it didn't distract me from the main narrative at all, but I just liked meeting these characters, as you say, and finding out enough about them that you thought, oh, that's quite interesting.
Yeah, Jack was. I kind of felt like giving Laura a bit of a hard time, and I kind of wanted to have a look. I think the chapter's called something interlude or some brief interlude. I can't remember. Because I have chapter little titles for the modern day section, and I just kind of a welcome break. I can't even remember what I called it, but it was just. I just felt, I kind of like to let her have a wee bit of fun and a bit of romance and whatever. So I let Jack come along, and Jack was he's a kind of cross between, I don't know, Jack Nicholson and Johnny Depp and
it's a kind of Hollywood star quality about him,
but a bit of a recluse as well. I mean, he doesn't. But Daniel Day-Lewis, there's a kind of Daniel Day-Lewis sort of follows his own path. No, I like Jack. Oh, maybe that's another novel.
How did you? Because the other thing that struck me was you got the settings and the setting through the references up spot on. I think that's maybe easier to do in the present day than it is to go back.
Absolutely.
I mean, was it a research thing, or did you just have mentions of the Savoy and what might be on the menu and all of these things, or was that something you went back and researched?
I always said it's kind of a difficult question to answer, because a lot of people say to me, "Oh, you must have done a lot of research," and then I say, "Well, actually, no," and then somehow I feel that I've kind of undermined their sort of feelings about the novel. But I might be doing myself a disservice in saying that I don't do a lot of research. I used to be a journalist, and I think one of the things I learned from being a journalist was that you learn a subject very, very quickly, and then you take what you can out of it, and then you forget it and move on. And so I suppose I've acquired sort of quite good research skills without knowing it that much. And so what I tend to do is I tend to look for little details. I'm not that. I mean, I know people. I mean, I did an event recently with I think you were there. It's with Sarah Sheridan.
That's right.
Yeah, and Sarah she's like a SWAT. She'll immerse herself in the whole era and so on. Whereas I'm kind of want to get in and out as quickly as I can, and in order to do so, I'm looking for just a little detail that will make my reader believe that I've done a lot of research.
And I think that's exactly what comes across. Well, I don't say it comes across that you haven't done the research, but just having a little bit, by not kind of going, well, here's the full extent of my research, which I don't think Sarah does either, but I think she probably has it in the background.
And she does it very well. She does it. I mean, I'm very impressed by her work.
But it seemed to me that you got the bits that you did put in were spot on, so you go, I can believe that this is where Georgie would have dined, and this is who she would have met, and this would have been the names or something great, like Rollo and full name.
Yeah, I don't know where these come from. I mean, but I think it's also that I think we're quite fortunate in the modern era that because we have so much access to material, through film and documentary and travel and everything else, we kind of we know a lot or can imagine a lot. I think in the past when people wrote novels, for example, especially the Russians, where you got every single detail. It's the same with the theatre. When you went to the theatre, you got every single detail. Now you can have a very sparse stage production because we'll fill in the blanks, and that's kind of what I try to do with my readers, is that I just give them enough. I mean, you mentioned the Savoy, right? Now, I could do a lot with the Savoy in the 1920s. I mean, they could have talked about the piano bars and the different restaurants and the blah blah whatever. Whereas all I had was this menu, which was a real menu. I mean, I actually was able to sort of Google it and found a menu from 1926 or whatever it was supposed to be.
Well, that's something you just, is absolutely available now that we didn't before.
Which is fantastic. And once you sort of throw that in, you go, okay, I can imagine the rest. So that's kind of my trick, is I'm just looking for that tiny little bit of information that is unique, as well, so people don't know about it. I mean, I kind of, when I'm teaching this creative writing, I sort of get my students to write a paragraph or something about arriving in New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting about it is that whether they've been there or not, they pretty much say the same thing.
Ah, right, because they know so much about New York.
They know about so much. So whether you've been to New York or whether you have, so what you need to do is convince your reader that you have been there. So what you need to find is that little hook that's different.
Yeah.
So if I write about skyscrapers, yellow cabs, broad avenues, big perspectives, Central Park, blah blah blah, fair enough. But if you write about the garbage men hosing the rats off the street at 6 o'clock in the morning, then suddenly you go, oh, okay, that's not something I knew about, and that makes me believe that the writer knows what they're talking about. So that's what I'm looking for.
That little bit of detail that isn't widely known.
Exactly.
Which I suppose is more difficult to find as well.
Yeah, and it's also fun. It's also fun, and it's great when you find it. You go, oh, okay, I'll use that.
So I mentioned that before we started, that my mum has read this book, and when I said I was going to be talking to you, she said, could you ask him, was he brought up with sisters?
Okay, that's an interesting question.
Yes. Well, the follow-up is, if not, where did he so successfully understand a female perspective, frustrations and problems with maintaining integrity? Now, she's written almost an essay for me to back up why she feels that this is the case.
Well, that's interesting.
But let's go with the first thing. How did you write it from the female perspective? Was that something that you
right? Okay, it's a question I get asked a lot.
Right.
I've quite an amusing one. Was when I was with my ex-partner, ironically. She was in the audience, and this woman said, "Oh, you write women so well. Your partner must really appreciate that." And I looked down at Sophia, and she just rolled her eyes. This is my second book where the main character, Liberation Slowly Can, was another main character's woman. I don't know where it comes from, Alistair. I mean, I don't think consciously about it. It's not like I sit down and think, I'm going to be in some kind of female mode.
No.
I tend to treat, I don't, men and women are still, whatever the gender, they still suffer from the same universal problems to a certain extent. I think I would probably shy away from writing a book where there was some very something that was much more unique to the female experience than the men. So I mean, maybe a female-daughter relationship or a rape or something like that. I might steer away from pretending that I would know what that was like. But I think when it comes to sort of general issues like struggling in a career and the challenges of the society, so I think that a lot of men, we experience rejection, and we experience this in the same way as women. But I do have a younger sister. I mean, quite a good deal, 7 years younger. So it wasn't like I was brought up particularly with a sort of lot of older sisters around me. So I don't know where it comes from. I think it's great that your mother feels that I've got some kind of an insight into the female psyche.
Well, I think she feels she's in her 70s now. I think she feels that some of her dreams and hopes were tempered by her gender. Did very well at school, but there was still the expectation that she might want to, she did want to go and be a mechanic or an engineer, but yet even in the way that gifts, and I know it still happens today to a different extent, there's gender birthday presents or when someone is born and all those things, but I think she felt that the frustration and disappointments of perhaps being a woman in the 20th century, mid part of the 20th century, you seem to have kind of got straight on, but perhaps you're right, it's just frustrations and disappointments that could happen to anyone, but for other reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I don't as I said, I don't find it difficult to write female parts. I mean, I'm always a wee bit worried when the book comes out, thinking, I'm going to get slated here because I'm pretending that I know what it's like to be these women and so on. But I have to say, I mean, generally it's been a very positive response to that. But it's a very unconscious ability or whatever. I don't sit down and go, okay, how can I just try and imagine what it must be like for a woman? I don't know. Again, it goes back to characters.
Yeah.
If you know your characters, then they will feel all of these things, whether, irrespective of gender, I suppose.
But I guess if you had, after the conversation that you had with your friend, if you said, right, I really don't want her to be recognised at all, so I'm going to switch and they're both going to be men, it would have been a very different book, I think.
Right.
Particularly in the 1920s, I think it would probably have been a very different book.
Yeah. It would have been more difficult to find a man's integrity challenged in the way that
I guess that's it. It's the challenging of it's the certain assumptions of the roles that women should fulfil both then and now that would have to be kind of changed completely.
Yeah, that's something good, because actually it's an interesting question. I'm trying to think. If could I've written that the same thing from the point of view of two men? Yeah, well, probably there's much more of a sense of entitlement, I suppose, for the male in those in those arenas which she was operating with, certainly Georgia was working in, and so it's like the chances of finding it would have been more difficult to create a situation where their integrity was being challenged. Yeah,
in such a way.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of there's when Laura is not overlooked, but when she gets kind of cheated, is that the right word? Or she gets betrayed, perhaps is the right word, in terms of who's going to her role in getting the play put on. There's almost an expectation from her, and I think probably from the reader, that you could almost see this coming, and that somewhere along the line she was being used, and I wonder if that would have been the same way. But I don't know. It's just something that occurred to me when I was reading it as well.
I mean, there is one of the things where Georgie's integrity is challenged is about whether or not she accepts an honour from the Queen, and I think that is a kind of the general thing. That could have been a man, or that could have been a man or a woman, and I think it's something I actually feel quite strongly about just in modern day, about people accepting peerages.
Even the fact that she got to the stage where she was being offered something from the Queen and an honour shows you the life that she had from her starting point to get there has been extraordinary.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about your about other books that you've done as well. The Glasgow To Galilee trilogy, which I admit I haven't read any of.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a shame. I would have brought it along for you. I was deliberate. As I was coming, I think, should I bring Alistair? And I said, no, I think he's read them all.
No, I haven't.
Okay. Well, there's something I need to remedy that.
I think the idea of reading 3 was just like, I've got so much stuff to read. 3 books.
No. I thought in the past that we might have. No, I'll make sure you get a copy then.
So, but give me a bit of a preview of it then, the Glasgow To Galilee trilogy.
Well, first of all, it was something I never set out to do. Right, I didn't want to write a trilogy, so there was that. Again, the idea came to me a long time ago now. I mean, the first book is The Credit Draper, which came out in 2008, so it's almost 10 years ago. But I mean, I wrote it a long time. I started writing it probably 4 years before that. That came from the idea. From that came from my stepfather, George, who's unfortunately deceased. Telling me that he had this uncle who was a credit draper. And I always thought a credit draper was a sort of peddler in the city. It was a thing that the Jewish, a lot of the Jewish people, immigrants who came here did. Right. When they came to Glasgow in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and it was an easy job to do. Right. Because there were sort of Jewish warehouse owners like Goldbergs, and so I don't remember Goldbergs was.
Yes, yeah.
And so if they could say to someone, well, look, here's our goods, go and sell it on credit, and as long as you pay us before you get your money before you pay us, then you can make yourself into a business. And it was a very low risk for the warehouse owner. And my grandfather was a credit draper, and I just assumed that they all worked in Glasgow, or in Glasgow, which made sense. But my stepfather George, he told me that he had this uncle who was a credit draper in the Highlands,
right?
And so I thought, well, that must have been a very odd experience, being a sort of Orthodox Jew, perhaps with the garb and the long side locks, perhaps, I don't know how they dress, turning up in some little Highland village trying to sell aprons and shirts and so on.
Sure.
And so I just thought that clash of cultures was very interesting. As soon as I heard that, I thought, that could make a great story. Is the clash of the sort of Jewish and Scottish culture.
Sure.
And I guess probably psychologically, the reason was it gave me an opportunity to explore my own identity in that context. Because to be honest, I think all novels are about themselves.
Yeah.
Ultimately, even though they will never admit it, or they don't know it at the time. They're basically writing about themselves, but just finding a vehicle in which to do it. And so my vehicle was a credit draper. But unfortunately, the Scottish culture and the Jewish culture, actually, there wasn't so much of a clash of identities. Because there's quite a lot in common.
Right. Okay.
There's sort of social justice and education, and just the violin and the herring and the music. So I actually had to struggle to find some kind of conflict. I thought, there's just going to be all this great stuff, anti-Semitism in the Highlands, and they were treated really badly and blah. No, it wasn't like that at all. The rest was actually quite the cultures kind of meshed quite well, and I think still do. And so that was a bit of a struggle for me to find a conflict there. And then part of within the credit draper, the main character Avram, he had an adopted sister, or he was adopted into family, and Celia was the sister, and she was involved in the rent strikes and Red Clydeside and birth control movement in Glasgow in the 1920s, because Glasgow was quite an advanced sort of politically then for the labour movement, and she was just a sort of character in the credit draper. And I met this publisher at an event down in London who said to me, who'd read the book and said, "What happened to Celia?" Right? And I thought, I don't know. I didn't really give her too much thought up beyond the novel. Yeah. Unlike somebody like J.K. Rowling, who was sort of filling cabinets of her characters. And he said, well, that's a shame, because the Jews were quite involved in socialism in the 1920s, and there was a lot of conflict there because they were thrown out of Russia, in pogroms and so on, and then suddenly Russia became this sort of hotbed of revolution and the October Revolution and so on, and so the Jews became quite conflicted about that. Here was the country that sort of threw us out, but now it's this bastion of socialism and communism. And so that inspired me to write about Celia. And then I can't remember where the trilogy thing came from, but she ends up going to Palestine at the end of the novel. Right. And so then I thought, well, I better finish that off and with a novel about Palestine, about Palestine and the sort of the land issues and so on in Palestine in the 1920s after the Balfour Declaration, which is just 100 years. It's going to be 100 years this year. Yeah. Which is going to raise sort of awareness of that whole issue again and so on. So that was my trilogy that I didn't want to write, and I ended up writing, basically. So and in between was Exquisite Sense was beautiful. That was possibly a mistake.
What do you mean it was a mistake? To do the book in between?
Yeah, it was kind of. I did the first two, and then I went to Exquisite Sense because that was written, and then I went back to Land Agent, and it might have been better to do the other way around.
Okay, that's interesting.
That's what happens.
What I remember at the time when we were talking about an Exquisite Sense of what is beautiful, is that you'd said that I think it had been written. You had it written, but you couldn't get anyone to publish it. Was that right? I might be misremembering this.
I might be just forgetting it. The original idea for Exquisite Sense went way back.
Yeah, I think maybe that was it. Maybe it was one of the first things that you.
Yeah, I wrote the first chapter was a short story, but I think I wrote something like 90. I was still in Japan at the time, 94 or something.
Okay.
And then it was actually published as a short story in London Magazine, I think in about 2002 or something. So I'd started on it years and years ago, and I'd been rewriting it, and so I think it was just that it was ready.
Yeah.
It was ready at that time. And then The Land Agent, which was the third novel in the trilogy, that wasn't written at that time. So I just brought out, and Sarah Hunt at Saraband, she loved it. She was very keen to publish it. So one of the fact that it was just dated over such a long period of time, I'm very proud of that novel.
Yeah,
I think because it took me such a long time, or it was, as I said, it was developed over such a long period of time, that I feel it has got real depth to it.
Well, as you know, it's one of my favourite books of the last 10 years. I just think it's fantastic.
Happened 10 years before.
Well, there was some good stuff.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, you've said that when you did the Credit Draper, then someone said, "What happened to this character? You've got to write more about it." I still think what happened to the Water Wheel, which is the book in An Exquisite Sense of What is Beautiful, which is being written, and I still think, well, what happens with that? I'd like to read that book. It's interesting that you've got every book we've spoken about so far, that there's been a feeling that you could have gone elsewhere with them, which is good, I suppose. It means you've got lots of scope for stuff already there.
Well, the thing with the Water Wheel was that the Water Wheel is a novel within the Exquisite Sense of What is Beautiful, and it's the novel that made the main character Edward famous at the time, and I felt the problem with the Water Wheel was that Edward, he became this famous. He was a famous writer, and this was his great novel, and so I felt that I would have to write this great novel. There was as you know, the original pattern for the book was that there was 3 strands. There's Edward in the present, there's Edward in the past, and then at the same time there were extracts from the novel The Water Wheel. And I think originally I wrote it in the past, and then it went to the present, and then I had the novel The Water Wheel intertwined with it, and then I separated it all out, and then I entwined them all together, and then as it ended up with the novel at the end, with the extracts at the end. But I felt that since this was his famous novel, I was going to have to make it into this great novel, which I thought, well, I don't know if I can't really do that. So I just tried to shorten it down and give you extracts. Otherwise,
so again, just show enough that you could believe that this was.
But I thought I can't sustain this. I'm going to have to make a Booker Prize winning novel. So I did what I could with the Water Wheel. I loved that hotel where the novel takes place, the Fuji Hotel in Japan. And again, the weirdest thing with that was that when I was living in Japan, I lived there for 7 years, and one of the very first trips that I did out of Yokohama and Tokyo, where I was living, was to go into the countryside to Hakone, which is a sort of resort by lake and so on. And I was coming home that evening on the bus it was a bus to the railway station, and we were going round the hillside, and we just turned into this village, and there was this hotel in the village, and it's a really old-fashioned Japanese hotel with the sort of the curving roofs and sort of balconies and all the lanterns and everything. And it was just being lit up at night, and I just got this really, really strong feeling about this place. I just thought, there's something that's really important about this building for me, and I don't know what it is. It was like some kind of premonition or deja. I think it was a deja vu. It was like, I know this building. There's something about this building, and I went there. I stayed there a couple of times. It turned out that I didn't know anything. I didn't know what the building was, and then when I went back to Japan, to Tokyo, I asked my friends, and they said, "Oh, this was the first hotel that was built for foreigners in Japan in the 1880s."
Right. Wow.
And it was, when I say for foreigners, it was so that there was toilets, Western style toilets there, and beds, as opposed to futons and so on. And so as a result, lots of the famous people that came to Japan would stay in this hotel because it was the only one that would allow them these kind of comforts. So you had, as I think it mentions in the book, you had like William Holden, Helen Keller, Margaret Thatcher, John Lennon. I mean, they all stayed at this hotel. And when I went to stay there, the price, I don't know if I've told you this.
I don't think so.
No, but the price of a room was the number of years in dollars since the hotel had been founded. So it was like about $113 or something a room, which was, because it was 1993. It was 113 years since the hotel had been founded. That was where the Exquisite Sense came from. I came from the building.
The building itself. That's fascinating. Yeah.
And then I've always been interested in this. I've always been interested in this theme of denial.
Yeah.
And just the United States and the Tommy bomb. I just think there is this real disconnect between, killing 200,000 people within 2 days. I mean, it's an absolute, if you couldn't do that now, I mean, you couldn't do that, but I hope not. But you couldn't really get away with that now. And but there's never been any kind of reflection about it. The Americans just do not reflect on it at all. I mean, they've tried to have exhibitions about it and all this kind of thing, and America stands up and talks about everybody else as being an axis of evil, and North Korea are using with their nuclear weapons, but actually America is the only country that's ever done it. So
they've collectively, culturally,
they've just completely don't even think about it.
Yeah.
And the lies. I mean, if you asked an American now, you'd say, well, why did they do it? And they say, well, it's saved 1 million lives. It's just not true. It's just not true. It's like, I mean, it did save lives, in that the war didn't continue, and if it had continued, maybe another 20 or 30,000 people would have been killed, but not 200,000 Japanese. And so there's that element of denial, but I also think that we also, as human beings, we're also in denial. Especially we're in denial about death usually. We're going to die somehow in the end of all of this. So that were the two themes really.
Because that's what I thought worked so well in it, was there's the kind of, there were big themes being addressed, but there was also incredibly personal and beautiful one-to-one relationships that were being examined as well.
No, that was I thought that worked well. I think that's important. I mean, I don't want to blame, say, look, America, it's terrible. You're in denial about this, because it's a very human frailty. And so I wanted to show in Edward that, despite the fact that he was the mouthpiece for decrying America for what it had done, that he too was in denial, and he's had his personal denials about his violence in his own life, So that was what fascinated me about that book.
Well, I highly recommend it to anyone listening. Absolutely, as I do A Woman of Integrity as well.
Yeah, I was a bit concerned about you reading Women of Integrity, because I know you really enjoyed An Exquisite Sense of What Is Beautiful, and I thought, this is going to be a bit lighter for him, and he's not going to. It's not. I don't know. I just thought, you might find a bit more frivolous than my previous.
Whether you meant it or not, it's packed with really interesting areas to examine, and I think what really is at the heart of that is this comparison between what it was like to be a woman in the 1920s and what it's like to be a woman in the present day, and the things that are similar and also the things that are very different.
Right.
And in there, that's what I found it really interesting.
Okay, that's interesting. Did your mother have anything else to say on the subject?
That was the main thing. I think she just wanted to say how did you manage to get into their minds, and then she went off to talk about basically about her own experience. How she starts off by saying women then, talking about in the 50s and 60s, were considered as handmaidens to the male population. Now you was wanting to write The Credit Draper the kind of inspiration to write, or were you already writing? Were you all because you studied law and then you were a journalist after?
No, I studied law, and then I quit. Right. I gave up law when I was 24.
Okay.
The ripe old age of 24, and I went travelling for 3 years.
Right.
Basically, because I just gone through my whole law thing, school, university law, very, very quickly. I was a partner in a law firm in Edinburgh by then, and it all happened to me too young, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted some time off. So I took 3 years off, and then I came back, and I was an administrator for the Cyrenians, which was a charity for the single homeless in West London. Ironically. In North Kensington, which is where all this Grenfell Tower thing has happened. So I was working with Royal Borough of Kensington, Chelsea, with the homeless, because they were giving us funding to provide housing for them, and also Hammersmith with the Labour government, which was actually Labour Council, which was actually they were harder to work with than the Tories. But I think the Tories just felt very confident in the borough, and so they were quite happy to throw money at us, which was great. And after that, I lived in a kibbutz for a period of 10 years. I was there for about 6 years, and I went to Japan, where I taught at university there, and then I came back here. I was a journalist in new media, all this the internet and the mobile phone stuff, and then I started writing. But I always felt that I would write, but I wasn't like writing.
Yeah.
So I listened to other writers talking. Ever since I was a child, I was writing diaries and journals, and I won a prize for this and all this kind of thing. And none of that. I wasn't doing any writing. I was not even reading when I was growing up, but I always felt that I would write eventually, but I needed to wait until I had some kind of life experience in which to write. And so I have great admiration for young writers who are able to write in their 20s and so on. I felt I had to wait until I had some kind of wisdom or something that I could put onto the page.
Maybe that goes, we're talking about research earlier on. You said, well, I don't appreciatively go out and research, but perhaps your life experience, the research is in there.
No, absolutely. In fact, the novel that I'm writing now, I've stopped because I need to go and live it.
Oh, interesting.
Then I'll come back and write it.
Can you talk anything about that, or is that?
Yeah. I mean, it's if I'm not sure if I'm going to. I always say this, but I'm not sure if I am going to write another novel. Although I'm a third of the way through this novel that I'm not going to write, and it's about a writer who has been, and this is, I've spoken to Sarah Band and Graham about this, and I've told them this happened way before anything that with Graham McRae Burnett and his bloody project. But it's about a writer who gets shortlisted for the Booker.
Right. Okay.
And he's on his way to the ceremony, and if he wins, he's decided that instead of this usual speech about thanking everybody and everything, he's just going to take his revenge on the whole publishing industry and all the people that feel that have rejected him and not supported him. So,
right.
Because he just thinks that's the truth. He wants to be authentic. It's about authenticity, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's about he wants to be authentic. And on his way to the ceremony, all these things happen to him. So he cuts open his hand, his son gets arrested, he assaults a fan, all this kind of thing is happening to him on the way to the ceremony. So that's the kind of the front story, is this kind of, it's the usual, on his way to do something, and all these obstacles in his way and all this kind of thing. But then there's this backstory about his life and how it's led him to this point, and it's about being a writer. And but he's come to this really crucial crossroads in his past,
right?
Where he's going off on some spiritual kind of search, because he's completely messed up his marriage and his career and all this kind of thing. And I'm stuck there.
Right.
I kind of feel I'm going to do the same now. So I'm going to set off for about a year now and travel and go on a spiritual quest. And then I feel I can write the next part of the book.
Research.
So that's research. It's not even. I don't even know if it's research. I just feel like I need to live that space.
Yeah.
That kind of quest, spiritual quest kind of thing. I don't have huge sort of ideas about what I'm going to do, but I just feel that I was trying to figure out, why am I not writing this next section, and I think I need to live it first. So that's the plan. I'm
interested saying that he stands up and has a go at publishing and the people in it. At the moment, it does seem to me that it's almost more difficult than ever to not just get published, but to get your book out there into the public consciousness. I mean, is that something that bothers you, or are you found difficult?
Well, there's two. I think there are two aspects to it for me. There's and I'm sure it's the same with lots of. It doesn't have to be writers necessarily.
Yeah.
So there's the domain of just writing and being just wanting to write and to create something, and I mean, essentially that's really what's important to me.
Yeah.
But then there's the other part of it, which is getting your book out there and getting it read, and getting it published as well, and that's kind of secondary for me. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm not going to deny that it has I'm not saying it's not important to me, but I don't like what it does to me either. I feel that it brings out sort of ego and jealousy, or professional envy, or frustrations, and why isn't this happening to me? Why isn't that? And I don't really like that part of it. I don't like what it does to me, so I constantly have to remind myself of the first part, which is what which is really about the writing. But obviously you kind of feel that you'd like some kind of recognition. I mean, I'm more interested in. I think I probably sold about 20,000 books, I would say, all of them together. Certainly Exquisite Sense did well. I think that was about 12,000 or 30,000. I think maybe the others maybe about 7,000. I'm not sure. Which is not bad. It's not bad. I mean, it's never not going to make you a living. That's for sure. I mean, I think you need to sell about 30,000 of one book. Yeah. To scrape by, basically. And I'm pleased with that. Yeah. I'm pleased with that. And I'm more interested in, if I was going to have any kind of success, I'm more interested in about things that it would give me. Like, one of the best things that ever happened to me through my writing was was I was awarded a Robert Louis Stevenson fellowship, and that allowed me to go and write in France in Robert Louis Stevenson's this hotel where he used to hang out when he was younger, and I was paid to go and write in this beautiful place for a month, and surrounded by all this kind of the energy, I suppose, of all these other people that had been there and so on, and I just loved that. That was really the reward that I wanted more than anything. So I think I suppose I'm not very sure how to call that. I don't know whether I want more my profile as a writer to be recognised, so that will give me opportunities like that.
It's interesting. I think that's something, as you say, it's not just writing. I think it happens in music, I think it happens in art, anything where you are producing, in a commercial sense, a product, but the way that is, again, a terrible term, but consumed, has changed so dramatically in the last decade or more, that you almost can't go in and say, I'm going to be a writer and sell. You probably never could do that and sell a huge amount of books, but certainly there was more of an expectation that was a possible career, whereas I think you're right, it's people create whatever art they do, and it's the opportunities that may come around from that maybe are more realistic in terms of moving forward.
Well, I also think if you're writing the kind of stuff that I'm writing, which is sort of, I suppose, and I'm air quotes here, since we're on there,
air quotes alert,
literary fiction, there's just less and less space for it. It's incredible, and so it's a really big problem. I was listening to Martin Amis, who was talking not so long ago about how when he started out, basically, of course he was the son of a famous novelist, but I think it applied to other writers at the time, which is basically he wrote a book, sent it to his publishers, and then they printed it and put it out there, and he didn't do anything. Now he's got to go out and he's got to go do these book tours, and he's got to do all these festivals and all these interviews and all this kind of thing, and he thinks that it's going to go back to the original situation where people that are writing literary fiction, they're either going to be nurtured by publishers or not, because that space that's out there now for festivals and media and all that kind of thing is being taken up by celebrity, cookbooks and whatever else, and it's been taken up by crime, and I'm not saying that crime isn't good fiction or anything like that, but as a genre,
crime pays in fiction.
No, it does. They've got their own. In Scotland, there's their own festival. If you go to other festivals, they're taking up lots of space there, and it's increasingly difficult for people who are writing literary fiction to get into these places now. And I can tell you straight off that if you speak to someone like Bob McDevitt, who does Blood Scotland, but he also does I Write. He'll tell you. He says, I can get to writers of literary fiction, well known. I know this. I know as a fact. I won't mention names, and I'll put them on the program, and they'll get 12 people. Yep,
I had this. I Write, again, I won't name names, but two of who I would consider legendary Scottish literary writers, and there was about 20 people in the room.
Yeah. And then you'll get James Naughty, or you'll get Mary Berry or whatever, and they'll pack the place out. And so if you're a festival organizer, well, what do you do? What do you do? I say, well, I can have these two writers. It's going to cost me, £300, and put them up, and a chair, and all this kind of thing. That's going to cost me. You're not going to get any money for it. Or I can get a celebrity chef with some book out or whatever, and they'll make me money. And so it's very hard. Pitlochry, I think it was Pitlochry festival last year. They had no fiction.
Really?
Yeah, it was just non-fiction and celebrity stuff and well-known names. So it's very hard to get into. It's very hard to get yourself into anything now. It's, same with, and the same applies to the bookstores.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's the same applies.
So what was Martin Amos's point? Of course, he will be one of the people that gets signed up by book festivals here, there and everywhere. But his point is that publishers will just support.
Well, they're saying,
off the back of all the Mary Berry hardback cookbooks.
Well, I guess. There's no point. It's like, well, if I can't get into these places, right? If I can't get into bookstores and I can't get into festivals and everything else, well, where are you going to get your literary fiction from, basically? And so he thinks that they will just go back to, publishers will have to just take a chance and nurture you, and push you out some other way. I don't know how, but that's the other thing that's happening now, is that writers aren't being nurtured. You'd be very hard pressed to tell me a writer now, contemporary writer, that has the same stature as Martin Amos, Ian McEwan, Mishiguro. People, where are they? Where are they? They're not, because they're not being there's nobody's being nurtured. You're getting a big advance. If you're lucky, you might get a big advance for a first novel. They'll make a big splash with you and everything else, and then the second one we're not particularly interested.
So the last ones you could maybe think of are Zadie Smith, Monica Ali, that kind of generation, and then
you'd be hard. Who are the Hilary Mantel maybe, but who? In Scotland, you'd be hard pressed to say who. There's Ali Smith, as you said.
I.L. Kennedy, but again from going for a while.
Yeah, James Robertson maybe, but who's being nurtured?
So unless you do get the kind of breakthrough that Graham McCrae Burnett achieved by getting shortlisted, that stood out because it was so unusual. Yeah,
he would. It's a great book. Sarah sent it to me before it came out, and I said to her straight away. I said to Graham, I said you'll be shortlisted for the Saltire for this straight off. I didn't realise the booker, but it is a great book, but it also had a great, the fact that it was a crime, it was being marketed as crime, which I don't think it is a crime novel, but that made it stand out. The fact it was a small publisher made it stand out. There was a lot of things that were working there that allowed that to happen, and Graham will be, he will be recognised. His literary career is assured for the rest of his life now, I think, and rightly so. He's a very good writer, and I liked Disappearance of Adele Bideau as well. I liked that very much.
Absolutely.
But apart from that, I don't know. I don't know where the right. Nobody's being nurtured.
No, and I think where they were finding a home were smaller publishers, independent publishers, and as they get less and less, then the chances will be less and less there as well. Someone who maybe could break through and sell even a couple of thousand on a small publishers may then have been picked up and taken elsewhere, but I think even that's getting more difficult.
If you look, there was a thing 10 years ago or something where they were trying to, I don't know if it was a marketing thing or what, but there was a thing where people like Alan Bissett and Rog Glass and Laura Marney, I think, there was a kind of class of something or other, I can't remember, as the kid coming out of the MLit course.
Yes.
But I don't know, Rogers, they're not being nurtured, I don't think. Alan is, I don't know, he's more politicals and plays. Roger's doing his academic stuff. There's no generation that seems to be nurtured by publishers, and I think that's across the board. I think that's it's a marketing thing. It's basically, it's much easier to take a young writer, make him or her the next best thing, put a lot of money in it, market it, to the hilt. They'll have a big hit, and then that's it. They might give them a second novel, but if they haven't, and the second novel tends not to, it's always the difficult novel anyway, but it tends not to outsell the first one, and that's the end of it, and then You know, let's move on to the next debut smash kind of thing.
Yeah, because the idea of the new is easier to promote than.
And I mean, I'm sure you know lots of people too. I mean, I know lots of writers who've had really good first novel deals, and that's it.
Yeah,
that's it. You know, and that's. I mean, I've never had that.
Right.
Is he speaking jealously and full of resentment and envy? I've never had that. But I know people that have had it, and when they get dropped, it's quite a big disappointment for them. You know, whereas I don't have that disappointment because I've never had it. Well, I've just remained in this even keel.
Self-deprecation aside, though, but it's a real shame because writing, like any other discipline, you know, it's a craft. You get better at it. You work at it.
No, absolutely.
And I think, you know, if you're losing all these potentially amazing novels and stories because people have been.
Yeah, no, I mean I think it's very frustrating. I mean, I'm again, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that you would feel that their, you know, that their career is being nurtured.
Well, you know, you said you weren't sure how I would. Think about a woman of integrity, but it's just so well written, David. So that, you know, if something is as well written as that, no matter what the story is, you know, I think you're going to capture people of good readership.
Yeah, but it's not getting out there.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Yeah.
You know, it's got. I mean, I get it's about
an appreciative readership for the ones who do.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you, but it's about discovery.
Yeah,
basically. And also just need a bit of luck. You just need a bit of luck as well, and I think everybody will tell you that. I mean, again, you know, as actors or musicians or whatever, you just have to be in the right place at the right time, or the right person picks up the book, and you know, they have a cousin who's this in the film business, or they this or that, and it just whatever.
Yeah.
It just there was a novel recently that came out. Well, it came out a long time ago, but it was discovered by Ian McEwan. I'm trying to think what it was again. It was about this. It was a university lecture in the 1950s. I can't remember.
Right.
I can't remember the name of it. But again, it was Ian McEwan came across this, and I think he mentioned it in some. Just on passing in the radio, or he wrote an article about it that included it, and suddenly everybody was buying this book. I think the writer was unfortunately since passed away, but you just need that little bit of a lucky break, and I mean without trying to sound you know boastful or anything. I mean I think that you know a couple of my novels. Are of a, you know, I'm proud of them.
Yeah.
And I would be, you know, I think they wouldn't be undeserved if they got some kind of, you know, advancement in the public eye or something. But you just need, you know, how are you going to get people to discover it?
Yeah.
You know, how are you going to get bookshops to put it at the front or whatever? It's very, very hard. You know? It's very hard.
Well, I hope we've not left everyone on a downer, but I think that's a good place.
Okay. Well, should we finish on a more positive?
Yeah. Well, let's go back to. I mean, your initial point. You said there's two stages of being a writer, and a writer.
Just give up now. If there's anybody listening to this podcast who thinks they might take some kind of no, it's hard. It's hard.
It sounds like this holiday of spiritual enlightenment is well needed.
But it's. I mean, people shouldn't have any kind of. Illusion, and the funny thing is that you know if you're lucky, even if you do get published, even if you're lucky, you know, and sell 500 copies, you know that's quite a lot.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, you'd be surprised at how you know how few copies people sell, even well-known writers.
Yeah,
I mean, what disappointed me a bit about J.K. Rowling with her venture into what was it, Robert Galbraith, was it?
Which did that's right. Yeah.
Was that the Cuckoo's Call or something?
Oh, I can't
something
remember.
like that.
Cuckoo's something.
was that really, despite the fact that she had a major publisher for it, despite the fact that that major publisher had got her lots of big reviews, blurbs for the jacket and everything, I think she'd sold like 400 or something like that, and then as soon as somebody, leaked the fact that this Galbraith was J.K. Rowling, it took off. But I really wanted her to know what it was like. I mean, not that she hasn't suffered for her art, but I really wanted her to know or be reminded how difficult it is, even when you've got that kind of marketing clout behind you. It was people, it's about discovery.
I remember at an event with James Kerlin, and he said that year, this is a few years ago now, he said, I sold £15,000 worth of books, that was it for the year, and I think, well, there you go. No,
he's quite bitter about that.
Yes,
about that, and he's one of the successful ones. He's and right. I mean, I don't blame him. I think he gets blamed a bit for his bitterness.
Well, he was quite upfront about it.
I know, but I think people think, I think when he won the Saltire or something, he gave some kind of speech that was a bit of a downer as well. People give him a hard time about it. Well, actually, I think he's right. It's very hard to get that space, but it's not. Again, it's across. The movies are the same. You go to the movies and you think, well, how is that doing so well, and then this lovely movie here is not. It's. I think at the end of the day, word of mouth. Word of mouth, certainly for somebody like me who's not going to have a big marketing budget behind me, that's what people like your mother.
Yes, exactly.
People like your mother that recommends it to a book group and they like it, and then they recommend it to somebody else, and then suddenly there's a lot of book groups doing it. Book groups are like 10 people, and then suddenly you've got a little bit of momentum and things. People are talking about it, and that's pretty much what you can rely on.
Well, David, I think that's the perfect place to finish. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And you have been listening to the latest Scots Whay podcast with J. David Simons. It's always a pleasure to chat to David, and I hope you found something of interest there. As yet, I can't tell you who we're going to have on next, but as we always say, it will be someone completely different. Thanks for listening. Cheers.